Welcome to Conversations with Chuck Bennington. I'm Chuck Bennington, and I don't know it all, and I don't pretend to, but I do know that I love my son, and I want him to have a better, faster, smoother journey through the trials and tribulations of life than I had myself. So here's my documented journey, stories, lessons, and experiences that are really for you, buddy. I love you.
And welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Chuck. Again, pleasure to sit next to you. Well, kind of sit next to you virtually, my friend, and get to talk about all things life. Um, Looking forward to our chat today. How are you going?
No, these are good. Truth be told, because these are all like based in like full honesty and transparency, I'm not at my best right now. We were talking a little bit before the recording that my grandmother passed this past Thursday. That's not an incredibly heavy thing for me. We weren't extraordinarily close, didn't have the same relationship with her that I had with my grandfather. But just interesting thing to reflect on. And then also simultaneously, my parents were here this past weekend, not to coincide with the untimely passing. It was just they had a vacation out here that had been planned for a long time and been moved around. And they stayed the course because there was nothing they could really do, and the gap was
Mm,
only a handful of hours. So they came out,
yeah.
and that was all good. But I'm fairly behind on some work related stuff, and more notably in that work related stuff, some tax related stuff. And then
Mm-hmm.
related with that tax stuff, so, uh, some short-term capital gains on some cryptocurrency trading that I guess, like, the blessing is the curse. I had been more profitable with some of those things in 2021 than I had mentally allocated for, and now there is potentially a tax bill I was not anticipating. But these things happen, not the first time, won't be the last time.
No, the
That is
the
something
adults.
that we could pause, and just make a note that in the future, we should talk about, like, some financial structuring and tax related stuff. Because 'cause I've talked about where I've gotten a lot of my, like, views, beliefs, and ideas on money, at least
Yeah,
maybe a little bit in passing, but
yeah,
for sure not like, "Here's all the shit I wish that somebody really would have impressed upon me to, like, understand with money." And so anyway.
yeah. That'll be a good one to actually chat about. We'll pencil that one in. And the fact that the adulting stuff never goes away. There's
No,
always
no, no,
something.
and, like, I think that's it's helpful to navigate. Not that it's helpful to have experienced trauma previously to be able to shape a better response, when
Mm,
encountering, like, similar elements,
yeah,
but we can. Yeah, there's some good fucking story times that
yeah,
actually, like, now that I'm like, "We could do a whole episode on taxes," which would mostly just be
yeah.
like, "Is Liam interested in one day just listening to me get fired up and rant and bitch?" But
Well, I do love a good rant. So, it could be definitely worthwhile. We will pencil that one in. But today, I thought I would open up the space for us to reflect on, or for you to reflect on, I guess, a conversation we had on Instagram late last week regarding this podcast. And the intention was it was for Liam and like your biological father to be able to learn more about you and Liam in years to come to reflect. Um, but it's kind of taken on some legs of its own, and we haven't really pushed
I
it out
very,
to the.
very deliberately have not, like, shared, reshared, posted, because of, like, the exact conflict that you're speaking of, and that's
Mm.
kinda what led Lisa and I to chatting last week. She's awesome, and she's, been fan number 1, in a real sense, but it put me in a weird place to realize that you were propagating it and I wasn't, and it wasn't because I don't like it, don't enjoy it, I'm not proud of it, but that was never the intent or purpose, and I didn't know if it corrupted the intent and purpose and violated it in some way that is it not congruent because that is not what I set out to do and how I spoke about it, or is that not the case, and actually it serves the same purpose in a different, better way. And so, like, I've been struggling with it. And I'm like happy to talk through it. And I know that your default position will be not as the devil's advocate to keep it in the back pocket. And so, like, it makes it's very easy to reason my way to. It's very logical. Like, well,
Mm,
you're doing it, so why wouldn't you do more with it?
mm,
And in thinking about that, being able to frame, like, what is the balance for keeping the original intent of it being for Liam? And so,
mm.
like, you've been to some weddings, right?
Yeah. Yep.
You know when somebody steps up to make a toast and the whole room kind of pauses because nobody really knows what story they might get.
Yep.
And that's something that I've stopped to think about. I've really thought about this a lot over the last week. I guess since Thursday, so whatever, 5 days, 4 days. Um,
It's a week.
as we move, other friends, or even the episode that we did with Colin, having conversations with other people draws out more conversation.
Mhm.
If only to force me to answer more to my own thinking or to reason to something that I wouldn't normally associate with, like, hey, this is just a part of my life story that I've told, a million times in a million rooms to a million people. Maybe not all of it, but
Mm,
at least no short part of it. So do I get better stories about myself, my own experiences from the people that I have traveled with, coached with, businessed with? Do I get better conversations with people, even if I don't have a direct life experience? Can they draw other stories, lessons, thoughts, ideas out that
mhm.
still serve the original purpose? And so again, I mean, like, those are the two things that I thought about that really come to mind first, is where it increases the depth and breadth of the conversation.
Yep.
And then also opportunities to get people on that maybe there isn't as much congruence with, or we find that, like, we're fast friends, but we might not actually see eye to eye on this thing. But man, there's probably some depth in those conversations and some meat on the bone, as they say, because that, like, the challenged nuanced thinking is really where I feel compelled and called to, like, move myself further in my life. Just,
Mm,
it's it's worth being forced to really think about your own
mm.
thoughts and to figure out, can you really articulate and convey what you think, or do you even really know what you think? So yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's legitimate benefit in getting better conversation. And so those all of those things could still be accomplished without taking it any more public.
Yep.
That could still be everybody coming in for the internal side. And so then, that segments the conversation,
Yep.
right? So if all of those things can be done without making it more public,
Mm,
what is the defensibility on that side?
mm. I think so, yeah, you're right. My, default position is, you know, why not share it if potentially other people can grab inspiration, help from the stories? But also, I think we're staying aligned with the original intent. We're not monetizing it, marketing it, uh, chasing the eternal quest for like, share, subscribers. It's just the stories. And I know that I have been, when we first started publishing it, I just quietly just popped the episodes up, and hadn't really shared an episode per se. And how this came up was last week. I shared a screen grab of you and Colin, because you are two of my favorite humans, and we had, it was just so amazing to have you two in the same room chatting, and that's kind of how it started. And, like, this is a project, and I've shared the podcast privately with people who I know would benefit from some of your experiences, dad, business, relationships, and they've got a lot out of that. So I think there's power in the world you know, hearing those conversations and like you said, with other people. But as I reflected to you, it's also a very vulnerable position for you to be in to
Oh, that doesn't bother
put
me
your
in the
stuff out
least.
there,
That
but
that
also for other people as well.
Yeah, but I do think that, like, that's worth noting because I think a lot of
Mhm,
people, the decision-making framework would potentially be more influenced by a fear of the transparency and, like, the discomfort and just, like,
mm.
airing their shit and kinda going through it.
Yep,
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I find it very cathartic and helpful for myself, so maybe that's
mm.
just a story that I tell myself to make me feel better and more important than I really am. Uh,
I don't think so.
I don't think
But
so.
no, I don't think
I do see a lot of social medias, and it is very much so all like highlight reel. Not all of it, but a lot
yeah,
of it.
yes.
And so like leaning further towards that, I have gotten and not in like not in a dishonest way. I have gotten a large volume of messages and emails and face to face conversations, phone calls and text messages through the years through people that I've been exposed to in coaching and in fitness and in CrossFit on social media. And those have been good conversations for me to have to be to be able to still work on myself in a better, deeper way, to further move myself down the intended path as a guide and a coach in a different sense. And also legitimately good for other people. I can objectively say
Mm,
that like people have made sure that I have known if and when I have made a difference in their life that
mm.
was significant enough to them. For sure,
Yeah,
not of all people, but of most people, I try not to get distracted by, like, the clout chasing and validation game, which is why I'm perfectly happy to have, pictures and posts and reels that have, like, 10 likes because it's for sure not anything that
mm,
predominance of my followers or my audience or the algorithm would like. But I look at my use of social media the same way that I'm looking at a lot of this is my own documentation of a process and a journey. And so the bar is very low because I'm like, well, this thing brought me happiness and joy. And so cool.
yep, I'll put it
Um,
out there.
and so where I was going with that is though I have not really sought a predominance of like, hey, tell me I did a good job. Although I do very much so care about that and need
Mm,
validation probably more than most people. I have had a lot of people that have reached out of their own will, volition, and accord with nothing prompted to just, give me some good thank yous through the years. And I think that
mm,
most people get those in their life, I would assume.
mm,
Maybe maybe that's a big assumption, but I would imagine like most people get some thank yous here and there. They're really heartfelt, meaningful thank yous from the people they come in contact with. And I've been lucky enough to come in contact with a very, very large number of people. And so I don't know that it's anything that's like super specific or special to me, or if it's just a law of large numbers thing. But I do genuinely care in other people, and I do genuinely want the best for people. And so I don't know, is there a moral obligation if you have a chance to help somebody? Are you obligated morally to help them? Like I'm Liam's
mm,
father, and so assume that 15 years down the road, knock on all the wood that this never happens,
mm,
I come across a car accident that he's in.
mm,
Obviously, my largest, most overwhelming priority is like, that is it. That is the answer.
mm.
But you don't just like stop and look around. And you're like, well, I hope you guys got your dad coming. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's not like that's not the. I regret
I
saying that because now I internalized as like I'm not. I don't know. I'm like fucking super torn up and like very uncomfortable at all of it because like I'm no savior and I don't
mm,
want that to be what that reads as. I just
and it doesn't. It
fucking
does
know the
look,
right answer, lady.
it's, um, I see what you're trying to say there, and it is like my position, I guess I get, and probably maybe it's because we're coaches and more so than just movement coaches, but we're coaches of people. And once you start that path, you can't. Um, and I actually said that to a client a couple of days ago who's getting their first life coaching client, going, yeah, once you start seeing that stuff, you can't unsee it. Like you just, not everybody's going to be able to coach all the time, but you just can't unsee it, and that we feel compelled to just help people be their best, whether whether it's getting them to squat deeper or whether it's getting them to have a bigger conversation rather than just small talk. And I know we've talked on a previous episode that there's so much small talk out there, and we're just not interested in having that anymore.
Yeah.
It's and I think that's what first drew me to because I started following your content through someone shared something for your coach like you mean it posts, and a lot of that resonated with me. It was about the more deeper level of coaching and the relationships and that side of it rather than here's how to teach people to squat better. It's just I was
That
like,
has certainly been, that is not that it is not to diminish the incredible nature of like coaching
mm,
people tactically and tangibly hands-on in fitness with the thing, but my
it's
interests got a lot deeper a long time ago
mm,
because I recognized that so much of what was missing to make those other, not, I don't know, not less important, but more surface
mm,
level things like, hey, I've
mm,
told you 1,000 times to keep your chest up and your knees out. Why isn't that working? Is it you
yeah,
literally don't understand it? Because I don't think that's it. Because you can't feel
mm,
it now. Because we do a million things where like you get yourself into extension and you abduct. So like I know you can do that.
mm,
So why is it not more important for you to
mm,
correct your own squat? That's
yeah,
probably the thing that we should really spend some time on because it's a waste of your time, your money, your
mm,
energy, my time, and my energy if
mm,
just really not even solving the same problem, but just literally talking about the same symptoms.
yeah,
I moved through fitness without a coach predominantly in almost everything except my earlier ring work that Tucker coached me remotely through.
mm,
Never been a member of a box as a client, never had like a fitness coach. I ended up moving into getting some specialized coaching like later on when I was doing a little bit more competitive stuff. But um, yeah, a lot
it's
of it has really been self-guided and self-directed.
mm.
Um,
But I think the questions that you ask, and I'm by nature a reflective person as well. Might be why we get along so well. But the questions that you asked led to that reflection to what do I do in my interactions with people? How do I impact people?
well,
And
I guess, yeah, that's kind of like where I was going with it. I didn't have a coach to model. I
mm,
didn't have a coach, like I did later on, but not initially. And so where I'd said that, like, thinking about some of the deeper relationship, connection, communication, confidence stuff, it came to me early on. So I was like, I don't know what I don't know. I had never
mm,
been, on a football team doing 2-a-day line drills. So like that
yeah,
wasn't a framework of coach at all. And really, I don't know. Honestly, I think a lot of it is I was looking for validation.
mm,
Um, I did want to help people with a thing that had changed my life. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, most people get into coaching for like good reasons and the right reasons, but for me it was
mm,
from a very like clean slate perspective. And a lot of it was for myself is like, holy shit, fitness made my life way better. Why
mm,
didn't I care about it more earlier on?
yeah,
Why didn't more people care more about it? And so
mm,
if you care enough about your squatting, you'll work to resolve it on your own. And the
mm,
nature of our relationship really does make that transition from like engaging and training and teaching to actually coaching and behavior. But yeah, like the blah, blah, blah. Anyway, deep conversations, muy interesting, many much long time. And
mm,
I think that resonates with a lot of people.
mm,
And I know that it does because we have conversations like this. But as much as I love you, like you're not the only person that I have these conversations with through the last 14 years where they're like, holy
mm,
shit, why aren't all of us talking more about all of these things? Because we probably need to figure out more of that shit if we ever want to make it past like banded pull-ups.
mm,
That's not like the best, comparison analogy, but like in a lot of ways it's not. Because
mm,
if you could just hold your chin over the bar for 2 minutes,
mm,
I would bet you a very large sum of money that you would need exactly 0 bands for any of your pull-ups. So like if you have a definite guaranteed answer that will for sure fucking work,
Mm,
why are you not taking that answer? And so anyway, that's where more of like the deeper conversations had kind of been a bigger
mm,
part of coaching earlier on. And so being able to be challenged on the other side of it, I think there is value in that. And that like makes me want to, that is a reason that I can see for sharing it more, is the dual side of deeper, more challenging conversations to navigate. So, Liam getting to hear my side of it, me
mm,
go through things, to be challenged by other people that I've normally been on the other side of the equation from.
But
Um,
also being exposed to more people having those conversations rather than just mum and dad, having those conversations with me, he could actually get an insight that it's okay to have the conversations and it's not just limited to, well, this is just what we do at home and we're a bit different. It's like, oh, these men talk about these things. You know, um, all these people have shared experiences or not shared experiences, but they can talk through their experiences and their differences in a healthy way. That's more than just that sucks, dude.
well, and I guess like that's really what had me. That's what got me thinking about it in a different way. Is, I don't know if you knew this. I can't remember if we talked, but Colin's wife Jess had reached out to
Mhm,
me via DM, and she was like, I'm so grateful that you're doing this and that you've done it, because it helps me understand Colin as my husband and as the father of my children so
mm,
much better. That's
yeah,
hard to lean away from.
yeah, it is. It's massive,
Um, and so,
and
I mean, I think like uh, a book that I talk about a lot in coaching, and I'm sure we've talked about it, is Blink by Malcolm Gladwell.
mhm,
I mean, like, I already know my answer. I will make this public. I will share it and propagate it. But I guess, like, more than anything, I wanted to just have it be known to Liam and to myself, to force me to really talk through it, because there's a piece of it that does feel kind of like yucky and weird.
mm,
Like when it'd be like if you set out to give your son or your daughter or your dog, whatever, you got a dog, you're a dog mom. So, like, you give your sweet girl an awesome toy, and then
yeah,
you take the toy and you're like, well, all the dogs at the dog park can also play with it.
yeah,
And you're like, well, fuck, I don't know if that's the right answer. But then, like, well, maybe your dog has way more fun playing with the toy with all the other dogs. Maybe sharing is just a good thing on its own. And so I can argue myself in any direction, but
mm.
I don't know.
It's and I agree. It's that I after we finished messaging the other day, I was thinking on it, um, about, from Liam's perspective, going, well, Dad was going to record all this stuff for me, but he's just shared it with everybody. But I think that the core messages is not what I want to say, but along those lines of, the intent and like, I still feel like even when you're having the conversation last week with Colin, which is really our first external guest, like we've had Vanessa, which is going to be an upcoming episode, but she's really internal. She's on the team. Um, but I still felt like, and I felt like this in every episode, that you're still talking to Liam,
Well,
and
I
that's the way I
really
feel it.
that not get lost.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. If I had to name the fear,
Mm,
because genuinely, like, well, that would be a lie. I do give a shit about other people's thoughts and opinions, but
mm,
not an extraordinary amount, and especially not with, the things that matter to me with my family.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, maybe it's just being able to get this recorded. Like, it is, and you know what? Like, it's gonna be just like most things in life, probably like an enormous fucking, like, much to do about nothing, but just having it for posterity's sake, that it isn't a thing that is or was ever lost on me, that it
Mm,
isn't something that I take lightly, and that, like, I do I do reserve the right to move in another direction at any given time with like no
Mm,
fucking warning or disclosure or ask. If it
yep.
feels fucking weird to me, like I'll just let it exist and do its own thing. But
Mm,
the other pieces that had kind of tied in some of it is the idea of like impact and legacy, and not of myself and for myself, but for Liam.
mm,
And that was a lot of the intention that I move into fatherhood with, is to allow him to move through life better. And I don't think that that's uncommon, but I really want to impress upon him not to do anything with it, but at least the awareness and the idea of impact and
mm,
legacy. Like, hey, dude, you can do whatever you want. Like,
yep.
I really genuinely, I know everybody says it, but genuinely, I mean it. Like, I want you to be happy and successful in whatever terms you can actually define success in. And
Mhm,
that's challenging. That's not easy. That's not a gimme.
mm,
Some things that will, at least in my experience, and the experience of like people that I give shits about and think
mm,
about in kind regard. I don't know anybody that has made more impact and left more of a legacy of things moving on in a better place in their wake, that has ever regretted it or ever been
yep.
unhappy about it or ever been like, I really wish I would have helped less people.
Yeah,
Uh, really wish that like I hadn't actually left it better than I found it. Like I really wish that I
mm,
hadn't paid it forward. And so you're like, well, certainly not a bad thing. And so to be able to cultivate that with him,
mm,
what is the contrast between like setting the example and being like,
mm,
aspirational and showcasing it in a different way? Um, I don't know. That's a thing I'm thinking about. And I guess there's not like two sides to that, but like, do I owe it to him to embody trying to derive more impact and legacy for other people by like doing the thing in public
mhm,
out loud, like in front of people, to be like, yeah, it's weird, it's messy. I'm still fucking figuring it out as I go. Very sloppy,
mm.
but
I'm
if
doing
it
it.
has a chance to help somebody, dude, help somebody because the world's never
And
any worse off.
I think too, it's, two things on there, like, going back to, like, legacy, I often thought about in the gym, like, the trickle down effect of the impacts you have on people that you don't realize, like the ripples through their family. That by me coaching you in class every day, the impact that that then has on your family. I mean, Colin sent me a text yesterday that Poppy had said, they were in the gym saying, I want to learn CrossFit like Lisa showed you. Like, like, wow, feels. And, during COVID, we had challenges for the members of the gym, and one of the members had her grandparents at home. It inspired them to do a little more movement and stuff. You're like, that's the that's what I think, when I often struggle with going, why, when I've cleaned the toilets for the 100th time, like, why am I doing this? It's that stuff is the why. That's the stuff that fuels the engine. And I think sometimes we have an impact and a legacy without even knowing it. Like,
Well, I mean, we all
people,
do.
yeah. And I think we've got to, if we have an opportunity to, um, you know, share that, then I think then we should, to touch other people. I think then that's a powerful thing. And to also show, like for example, Liam, when we everything centers around that, but it doesn't have to be perfect to put something out there. It doesn't have to be neat and curated. Like literally,
Literally fucking can't be. And man, like
we
that's such a hard truth to know and to
mm,
still struggle and fight.
and to work through stuff on the fly. I mean, we literally get on this call, and in the first 2 minutes, what do you want to talk about? This is what we're talking about. Bang, hit record, away we go. Like, and we work through the concepts even in our own head in real time as we're talking about it. And you don't have to have all the answers up front and to have your script. It's okay to for people to see that you are thinking on something and taking your time to process it. It's, even lessons on that level are valuable. And as I said, all the way through this process, I feel like, you're having that conversation with Liam. I'm pushing the buttons, and and steering the ship. But essentially, it's I feel like you're still talking to Liam, and it doesn't matter. Like, I thought it was going to be interesting when we had Colin on. I thought I'll see if this changes the dynamic of the way that you have the conversation, and absolutely it didn't. And I
Really?
still felt the same. Yeah, I still felt the same in that episode, because I guess I see that as a little bit my role on this is that I'm a little bit of a gatekeeper or guardian of the intent, and to be able to say to you, listen, I don't think that one or that where that went was what you initially wanted for this. Now, if
Yeah.
you've changed that, that's great, but to still ask that question and to run it through that filter is what was our ultimate intent in sitting down to have these chats, and there's a lot of power that comes in that, and there's it's very powerful moments, but if that intent is still driving everything, I can see nothing but value all round.
Yeah. I mean, kind of like we were talking about with Vanessa, and maybe it was even some like the
Mm.
week before that. It's like can always go back.
Yeah, yeah, you can always get back.
As short as people's attention spans are, and also I've played enough of the games enough times for long enough to know that not that much really changes beyond the the action itself. Right,
Mm.
like, I don't expect to, like, share it to my stories and all of a sudden, like, there's this big, potentially corruptible media juggernaut where, like, there's fucking Doritos and Trojan condoms not gonna sponsor, like, it's, like, realistically, very, very little changes,
Yeah,
at least,
but I think
at
it's the knowledge of that.
yeah, to be able to really to make a deliberate decision and to really think it
Mm,
through. That
mm.
that was really important to me.
Yeah, and I think that's just a reflection on, and again, that's a powerful lesson in itself, to really, in affiliate, we always ask clients to focus on their why, and again, that it doesn't that's not limited to just business, it's this any personal project that you undertake, and I think that that's a good space to hold in that I can put this out to the world, but my intention is really I'm still just talking to Liam, and you guys get to have the privilege, should you choose to participate in that conversation or not. If we reach out, I know there's a couple of people we've talked about that you'd really like to have on, and if we reach out and they get to be part of the conversation, and then they have something tangible they can then leave for their kids or people who are important to them. So, or again, not. I mean, someone might come on and have a chat and go, I'm happy that we just
I'm so
chatted. I
glad
don't
I
necessarily want
don't
it
have
shared.
kids. Like, well, all right, let's
Yeah.
explore this.
Yeah, and look, there's a whole gamut of stuff, and you know,
Well, and
everyone's
I mean, there's no shortage of like good reasons, answers, and justifications. Like, if if nothing else, is it more entertaining to have like more conversations with more people, if for no other sake but the novelty itself? It's like, yeah, that's how humans are fucking wired. So like,
hmm,
there's no downside outside of what I really worried about is kind of the corruption of the intent.
hmm,
And then as like a big interesting fuck you mental exercise to kind of like cap the whole last handful of days off on that I've been thinking about. Joe Rogan has kids.
hmm,
He has a very, very big, very public podcast. Do you think his children are better or worse off given that he had had a $200 million Spotify deal?
yeah. Could lean both ways on that. you
Yeah,
know,
well, like, that's
financially,
not enough.
for
We
sure.
don't have enough information to like, make any kind of real
Mm,
thoughtful like contribution to that. But
mm,
it was just an interesting thing that I thought about. Because I talk with you a lot as we do these, that I try to think about decision making at least in this stage of my life, I often think about decision making on a continuum, right? So
Mm,
I'm like, well, on this side, nobody even knows that the podcast exists because like it doesn't matter because he's not at that point yet anyway, so irrelevant. On
mm,
this side of the continuum, if you mentioned earlier, like it's not that it's monetizing or anything like that, I'm like, well, what if the needle was all the way on the other side?
mm,
That needle moves independently of the needle of intent. That needle moves independently of the needle of like impact and legacy. These things are related, which is part of how like the universe often rewards things monetarily because of structures of value and attention. But
mm.
I mean, his life would not be any fucking worse off if I had a bunch more money.
No.
So not that that has anything to do with like where the conversation was, but the more I thought about it,
Mm,
the less, if we think about like reasoning, justification, belief as like a table or a chair with legs, by
mm,
the time I kind of talked through all of it, there weren't a lot of legs left for the side of not doing more with it and putting
mhm.
more just, public emphasis on it and like probably, I don't know. Now I fucking worry that like spending a whole hour even talking about it like seems fucking weird and arrogant. Like there's
It's
like I'm like,
no,
well, making it a
you know,
thing just to make it a thing. Like, no, that's not
I
it.
I think that I don't think that is so when I started my first podcast a few years ago now, I felt like such a knob and wanker for doing it. Like, it's just like, I'm
Was it
just
just
talking
talking to
over
yourself?
yeah, I was literally would plug a microphone into my computer and start talking, like, there was no video, God forbid, like, don't video, and it was just me talking about, it was CrossFit based, but around the affiliate, but theories around, I guess, why people did what they did and talking through concepts and I put it out there and went, who the fuck wants to hear what I have to say? Like, who am I to think that and because when I think about podcasts, I think about like, Joe Rogan, Brene Brown, like, those guys have got things to say. I'm like, who am I to think? And then I had some people come to me and go, oh, I really like that podcast each week. You should went, oh, you're listening to it. And they're like, yeah. And it took me even ages when I first started to even share it on my socials because I'm like, someone's gonna go, "You dickhead! Like, who are you to
Oh
do
well,
this?" And
that's the
it's
beautiful
just that,
thing about, like where I've definitely figured out like I'm like I'm a dickhead, I'm an idiot, I don't give a shit about fuck, I'm wrong all the time. Like
yeah,
yeah, being able to go into it with just like, this is a big wild experiment.
yep,
That's alleviated a lot of, that's a huge thing that's alleviated a lot of pressure because like that intention, it's so pure as a like guiding light of a purposeful thing that it absolves a ton of the other shit.
yep,
Like, if there was something that was uncomfortable for me to talk about, be like, well, is it uncomfortable enough for you to not talk about, to forego the opportunity for your son to have the
mm,
benefit that you set out from day zero to create? And you're like, ooh, well, Lisa, glad you asked. And so I think like
yeah,
holds it to that holds it to just a better place and purpose. And at this point, like I don't know what I'm really talking through besides like I have thought about it a lot in a lot of
mm,
ways. And I will, share more of it. And if people listen to it and they're like, you know what, dude, I think it's weird. I think you should just really like keep that as your little memento mori, like with
mm,
you and your fam bam and your son and Lisa. And like, cool, awesome.
cool,
Very happy to
mm.
put Genie back in the bottle because like
And let's face it, it's not like it's like you said, a giant juggernaut. It's very easy to put the lid back on it, click a few settings, and everything's back to private. And
or
you
like
record the episodes and you get them all on a zip drive to give to Liam one day. Like it's really
zip drive, yeah. He's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this?
yeah. Where am I plugging this in?
But yeah,
But
yeah.
I think I think it's a good not lesson, thought bubble, I guess, around integrity. It's I started this for this purpose. Um, Now it's kind of grown a little bit of. legs and the little bit of life. So what do I do with it at this point? And wanting to be transparent about the ultimate intent, which was stories for Liam. We could have probably called the podcast stories for Liam, to be honest. But
Not too
we
late.
no, we can change anything. But it's your personal uh, integrity about why did I start this, and if I do these behaviors, is it going to change what I really wanted to get out of this? So, and I guess that's another lesson for Liam in this process, and us talking today as well, is about it's okay to question and or the value in constantly self-checking yourself and self-correcting is like having that guiding light is like, oh, I'm way over here on the continuum. I need to drift back in here, and that it's okay, and that you can decide to do things differently halfway through a journey. That's okay too. It's, as long as you're doing something that's true to you, then that's all that matters. Like, if I felt like at some point our conversations were too
You're like, what the
scripted,
fuck are we even talking about?
manufactured, or curated, like here's our talking points for today, I'd be like, that's not a conversation. That's a talk show. That's not what we're
Yeah.
doing. We're having, so that's the filter then. So we've almost got two filters in being immediate filters being you and me to go, okay, we're both steering this ship. Is it still heading where we want it to go? Is it still going to the true north versus, you know, we're both going off in different tangents? And then you've got the other filters is if Vanessa listens to it, or as you talk through things with her, you've got these little stopgates along the way that we can adjust and correct if needed.
Yeah.
And if you're not feeling comfortable, then that starts a conversation about why. And then if it's genuine uncomfortable because of the direction it's going in, cool, let's bring it back and change it. Or just uncomfortable because it's icky to talk about some things. Well, let's keep talking about those things because they're the important things.
Yeah.
And and you've always been super transparent, super honest, super open. Like, some of the stuff we've covered has blown my mind in, even things that I didn't know about your experiences, things that you've struggled with. And there's so much power in having those brought to light that it might encourage other people to talk about some of those things that they've struggled with, and that it's okay to have those conversations and to put the light on it.
I know. I know that there's a lot of people, even in my own immediate, friend groups and social groups, people want for deeper conversation and more. A large segment of my personal and professional network is at an interesting transition point in the seasons of their life. There's a lot of us that are in the end of our 50s to the midpoint of our 40s, where this collective of humans, in at least the segment of it that I'm really exposed to, crosses some interesting lines. Primarily, business owners and entrepreneurs, coaches, obviously, military veterans. Like, those are three groups that I've got just a disproportionate sample size from I don't know who I am and what I've done and where I've been in the world. And I think those are good people to sit on the other side of a conversation, especially if there is a clarification, especially if there is a piece like, is stealing wrong?
Mm,
Well, are you stealing to feed your kids, or are you stealing because, like, you're on a chase for, like, the worst parts of the human condition? And, like, those are very
mm,
different nuanced questions. And so, maybe that's some of it is, does it serve the purpose in a better way for somebody to ask me a question or present a very difficult construct that I get to think about? And I
mm,
get to look at my own experiences and lessons and stories and network and resources and people that I know and be like, fuck, that's a real head scratcher. I've still got 14 years to come up with, like, a reasonably decent answer. And so, like, that isn't something that I thought about until, like, right now, but
mm.
I am very lucky to have some people that contend with some of the more challenging pieces of at least like what I have experienced in my own life, and like in those three little bubbles and subgroups. Um,
Mm.
Owning a business is not easy or for the faint of heart.
No, that's for sure.
Um, coaching is Coaching is different than training. Talk about that ad nauseum. Won't get into that a lot. Coaching is easy to get into for the wrong reasons, but it's exceptionally hard to stay the course.
Mm.
And then people in the military have a lot of just really interesting experiences and exposure, and generally some larger consequences to thought processes and like decision making framework
Mm.
abilities. It's one thing to, lose in the boardroom, it's another thing to lose in the battlefield. And so there's a lot of like more tempered kind of like nuanced conversation that can be forced by those three groups. And so maybe I owe it to Liam to get better questions, to force me to come
Mm.
up with better answers and ideas. And that, as we talk about all the time, like shadows and blind spots exist specifically because you can't see them and shine light on them yourself.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I think that's there's a lot of power and potential in that for sure. And I think people of our, even though I know I'm a little bit older than you, but of our sort of generation and experiences now, with the advent of social media and the prevalence of everything is a highlight. We're actually just like, I just want something that's real and tangible and something significant rather than, small conversations. It's like I don't have my time on this planet is ticking. I really don't have time to talk to you again today about the weather. Like, or I
Or
reveal
if we
something
are
to
going to
you
talk
and you
about
don't.
weather, like let's talk about like where clouds come from. And like
Yeah.
I would assume most people have some general idea about like evaporation and condensation, but when was the
Yeah.
last time you talked about it? Because that shit really stretches your brain and your thinking. To
Oh,
even like, if we are going to talk about smaller shit, can we at least have interesting conversations?
And and also when you have a conversation with somebody and you reveal something and they're like, "Oh," and it's kinda like they're there. It's like we don't wanna do that anymore. It's like, "Okay, I don't have time for this, and now I know where you sit in the circle." Like, um, I've, completely 360'd my life in the last 2 years and,
No
it's
shit.
I'm I don't like having the, generic conversations now. And, truly that path was started through having conversations with meaning and intent with you and Tony as part of our coaching relationship, coach client relationship at Fit Affiliate, which was about a business, but it turned into so much more. And there was actual, real, honest conversations that I'd never had with anyone in my life. And going, this is what I want to talk about. This is like, uncomfortable and tears and like holy fuck, but really powerful conversations. And so since then now I just don't have any time for, if you just want to be generic with me, cool, but we're not going to have many interactions.
Yeah.
With and it's just going to be very tick and flick because I'd rather be over here talking to somebody about something that really matters to them or to me and know that it's okay, you know. And I think that that's the power.
No, it's for sure interesting to talk through and about. And like maybe that ends up being a helpful thing for Liam, is to see, similar to what you're speaking about, that most people come out of the other side of a more challenging conversation happy that they went in.
Mm.
If
Yep.
if it is the right people, the right purpose, the right facilitation, like not looking for arguments, fights, or debates. But I think most people that are like, dude, here's something that's heavy on my heart that like I'm fucking
Mm.
struggling with, and just saying it out loud, rarely do you not immediately feel better. Or if you're like, hey, here's some
Mm.
shit that I don't know, I don't understand. Here's all the things that I'm thinking. Here's why I think I might be thinking this way, but like, fuck, what do
Yeah.
you think? And so, if he gets the ability to see that that is not a bad thing, but it's not as uncomfortable as we make it out to be in our heads. That universally, almost everybody involved in the process ends up fucking super benefited.
Mm,
Maybe that's enough to just be like, yeah, when I'm fucking struggling to figure some shit out, I can just tell somebody like, dude, I don't know, but here's what I'm thinking.
mm,
Or like, hey, like this doesn't feel good. This feels some kind of way. Is that helpful? And I don't have any reason to believe that it wouldn't be helpful to be like, holy shit, here's a bunch of people that like knew each other but didn't really know each other.
mm.
It's okay. Just get the
Yeah.
shit out because it'll eat you alive. And if you don't know,
And
that's okay too, because neither does anybody else. And it's actually fucking way more empowering to be like, still figuring it out. Colin and I, we had never really had any deeper, longer conversation at all. We just exchanged some casual, DMs back and forth through the last, couple of years.
mm,
But felt very comfortable talking with him.
mm,
I think that that's, a good conversation for Liam to have that was facilitated because he's like, hey, this is a thing that I would like to get your thoughts on and talk about.
mm.
And incidentally,
Well,
it's a lot of shit that we have covered, would cover, is inevitable. But to be like, if I wanted to make this the most useful thing, to have the greatest amount of shit just like out there, it's better to have a larger data set. It's better to have a larger
mm,
sample size. And especially if in putting that sample size together, it's more humanizing, it's more relatable, and it also, not that it's a skill development piece, but just like shows that it's okay, dude. Everybody is struggling with some shit. Nobody has it
mm.
all figured out. Everybody that I know that is successful has been forced to figure out a way to laugh at themselves. You
Yeah.
can't make it without fucking up and failing. I don't know, just all those things. I think the more, not that they haven't all been like done to death, said to death, like anywhere, everywhere, which is why the self-help book section at the
Mm,
fuck bookstore is, it's like
mm.
2 books that turned into like 10,000 books. But for whatever reason, as much of that as there is, it isn't enough to fix what needs to be fixed in the world and for people. And so I don't know, I guess one
Well,
one at a time, one interaction at a time, one thought, one idea at a time is really all we can ever do.
and we can just do what we can with what's in front of us, really. I mean, Colin shared the did a story with the podcast saying that, it was to have a chat about some of life struggles that men, husbands, dads, and coaches find in everyday life. And he's put a link on there with normalize the conversation. So I think that's a really good little a summary, I guess. Normalize these conversations, and so that
Well, and if for nothing else, like fuck, dude, talk about some deep shit. Like, even if
mm,
it isn't to pass on any like major life lessons, like, dude, if you want to talk
mm,
about clouds, it's way more interesting than just more dumb shit. I
yeah,
think that there is a, I know we're running short on time here at the
no,
end. There is, at least for me, at least for you, at least for a lot of the people that I talk to, there is a very specific segment of our generation that was that narrow little gap that had the analog childhood and the digital adolescence and adulthood,
mm,
where you have the ability to remember a world. Not that it didn't have small talk,
mm,
there was so much less of it because you
mm,
didn't have the ability to have everybody up to speed on disseminated like same level information.
mm,
Even getting a basic piece of information like, the score to a fucking rugby game or a football
mm,
game, like not
mm,
everybody knew immediately because they hadn't all just watched it. So there's an element of like, here's what the score was, here's how it
yeah,
went down. Like, even
mm,
small talk day to day shit, as I think back to my own childhood, the
mm.
small talk was better fucking small talk.
Oh,
And I
I
hadn't
remember.
thought about it until like right now. But there is a very general sense of people that are
It
like,
is.
I feel the distraction. I feel
Yeah, I
the
mean,
short attention span. I
I
feel my cluttered brain and my cluttered life catching up, and like I yearn for a piece of it that cuts through the bullshit and the noise and helps me remember like who I am and why I'm here and what matters.
clears the air, and it does. Like I would sit at the with the grown-ups at my grandmother's dinner table, and, when I reflect, they didn't filter any conversations because I was sitting at the table, and, they talked about things, relationships, people, you know, not just, "So, how was school?" Like, there was nothing, they had arguments, and they had conflict, and they had resolution through that, like, I had a front row seat to that, but now people sit down and they're on their phones and they've got the TV on in the background, and, this dining room was in a completely separate room of the house. There's no TV on in there. It was just people sitting down having conversations about memories and about experiences, and yeah, you don't get that as much now when you reflect on it, that's for sure.
Bring
Unless
it
you
back.
unless you intentionally sit down to have a conversation. It just doesn't happen organically as much.
Well, and it's like I am who I am as often as I can muster the competence and the courage to be myself, and that is not always the case, and I'll be the first to admit it. I
Mm,
But dude, like when I have the ability to just like move through life and have conversations like these, I never end up regretting it or being on another side of being disappointed in it. At
yeah.
least I can't think of a single time, and like it was probably more of a preface than there needed to be, but just never want to seem like I've got answers or have it all figured out, and for sure not always who I want to be in a given situation. But in having more challenging conversations and like just talking about just some real life shit, I
Yep.
don't know that I've ever been on the other side post conversation when like, could have done without that one. There's
Yeah.
definitely like some whiny bitches that I've come across and some like real victimhood mentality stuff.
Mm,
But even in leaving those, I have a renewed sense of gratitude and appreciation to just stop and reflect. Wow, I'm
mm,
so glad that's not how I view the world. I'm
yeah.
so happy that that's not how I associate my own human experience. Like,
Mm,
sucks that you are having a shitty day and a shitty life that you're a participant in designing, but,
mm,
um and, even in
yeah.
that, is the world worse off for giving some people an ear? Probably not.
No.
I don't know.
Perfect. I think, look, I've loved today's chat. I think we've
Well,
covered
if
a lot
nothing
of
else,
territory.
documented, right? And, like,
Yeah,
maybe that's all that it needed to be is that
and maybe that's a good point at this part in our journey, is to stop and reflect on what we're doing, why we're doing it, and making sure that we're still good with that. And even if it takes on a little life of its own, then that's okay. We know that we're still in control of the ship and can change and alter, and that Liam sees down the track how much, thought was put into maintaining the intent and maintaining our true north for this, which is talking to Liam. So, and to date, that's not been lost, and I'll continue to make sure that I don't let you lose it, because that's pretty important. All right, my friends,
Alright,
good chat.
good chat.
Thank you so much for listening to another conversation with Chuck Bennington. Hope it was enjoyable for you. Hope there was some value and some benefit in it. Maybe even had a laugh or two. Even though these are primarily for me and Liam, we sure love to help a friend in need, because it's a friend indeed. So if there was some piece of it that was good, please feel free to share it with somebody else and pay it forward. If you think what we're doing is rad and you want to support it, please just like, subscribe, share, tell a friend. Appreciate you, dudes.